go.
Me? Now? Now?
Now.
Woo! I am the ghost of fantasy author Katie Brisky. Welcome to Ephemera!
And I am editor Jen R. Albert. Welcome to Ephemera.
Usually we hold these events in the Glad Day bookshop, and while we await her triumphant return, we are very pleased to be your on-screen spectral friends right here on YouTube. We would like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon.
And the land on which I live and work is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Additionally, this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation.
I've seen the land that settlers now call Canada described as haunted. As we live, work, and create upon this land, we do so alongside the specters of colonialism, racism, and genocide. Like ghosts, these traumas function out of time. They happened in the past, they're happening now, they have never stopped happening. In many haunted house stories, there is an attempt to explain away or to rationalize the ghost. Those colonial politicians, they were products of their time. Well, that was a dark chapter, but it's over now. Inevitably, these attempts don't work. Ghosts will make their presence known until they're laid to rest. And while the metaphor carries well, let me be clear, we're speaking about living peoples. We're speaking about Vivian Ketchum, a residential school survivor recently told to leave a bank branch. We're speaking about Curve Lake First Nation, one of many First Nation communities that still doesn't have clean drinking water. We're speaking about Tecumloots to Secwepemc First Nation, whom Prime Minister Justin Trudeau ignored in favor of a family vacation on the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. We cannot continue whistling uselessly past the darkness of our past and present. We must do the work to build a future of mutual respect, friendship, and trust. Reconciliation is our unfinished business. Yeah.
A reminder to everyone that our code of conduct is posted online. If this is your first event, please check it out on Twitter or Facebook. If you are so inclined, you can still feed a Fred the physically distanced donation dragon. You can find the link to our coffee at the top of our channel near our banner or on our Twitter or Facebook. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first guest. Please welcome Sarah Monette. Sarah Monette has published more than 50 short stories, 7 solo novels, and 3 collaborations with her friend Elizabeth Fair. Her most recent novel is The Witness for the Dead, great book. The Goblin Emperor, written under the pen name Catherynne Addison, won the 2015 Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel and was a finalist for the Hugo, the Nebula, the World Fantasy Award. Her work has been translated into Russian, Japanese, Chinese, German, Turkish, Hungarian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Czech. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. So I am reading a ghost story, which means that inevitably we need a content warning, which is, in this case, a fatal fire and dead children. The other things you need to know about this story is that it takes place in a museum, and the narrator is an archivist there whose specialty is occult esoterica. So without any further fanfare, The Haunting of Dr. Claudius Winterson. That fall, the Parrington Museum's Templeton scholar was a man named Claudius Winterson, of whom my colleagues had nothing good to say. Dutifully, I attended his public lecture, where I sat well to the back and asked no questions, although several occurred to me. I had not intended, duty or no, to attend the reception for museum patrons afterwards, but my colleague, Miss Coburn, caught me and would not let me go home. There was a crowd, perhaps even a crush, and the enormous punch bowl that had belonged to Samuel Mather Parrington's mother had pride of place on the long table of hors d'oeuvres laid out in the Templeton Gallery. You don't want punch, do you? Miss Coburn shouted in my ear. No, I said. How long? 15 minutes, she said firmly. It won't kill you, and if you make sure Dr. Starkweather sees you, it might do you some good. I suppose, I said. She laughed. Just imagine a debutante ball and how grateful you are this isn't one. I might have shuddered visibly. Miss Coburn took pity on me and released my arm. I do want punch, she said, but I will not make you get it for me. Oh, hello, Miss Parrington. Hello, Miss Coburn, said Miss Parrington. Mr. Booth, I didn't expect to see you here. Did you enjoy the election? Before I could put together a coherent answer, she went on, it's always such a pleasure to listen to the Templeton scholar, such learned men. Miss Coburn took the opportunity of seeing a fellow archaeologist in the crowd to slip away, and I was trapped with Miss Parrington and her inexhaustible flow of words. It was while Miss Parrington was rehashing the Templeton scholar's lecture from the previous year that I saw the child. It was a boy dressed in a black velveteen suit. He was old enough to be steady on his feet, not to say agile, as he neatly evaded the oblivious adults who loomed over him on all sides. At first, I was merely puzzled. It was not forbidden to bring children to the Templeton reception, but that was almost certainly because no one in the Friends of the Museum had imagined that anyone would. I looked around, but saw no one who looked like a plausible parent. Miss Parrington said something about Dr. Winterson's command of Byzantine history, about which Mr. Felden and Mr. McGann had said other, far more mordant things. And I realized the child wasn't simply wandering through the crowd. He was purposefully following someone, darting wide around a dowager, but then returning to the line of his quarry's path through the crowd toward the punch bowl. Quarry was a ridiculous word to choose. I chastised myself. But that was when the child turned his head toward me, and I saw that he had no face. From his hairline to his high collar was a gray blank, as if he were an unfinished drawing. I might have yelped. I certainly recoiled. Miss Parrington said, Mr. Booth, are you all right? Yes, I said, yes, I trailed off, searching for an excuse of some kind. I knew without need of asking that Miss Parrington would not see the child. And she said, did someone bump you? The reception really is too crowded this year, which, of course, it's a good thing that so many people come. That is one thing about Dr. Starkweather, and I've said so before. He does get people to come to the museum. The child had vanished. The crowd had swallowed him. There was no way now to guess who was the object of his pursuit. And what I would have done with the knowledge had I had it, I did not know. I fled the reception without seeing the child again, and fully expected that to be the last of the matter, whatever the matter was. What I did not expect was to encounter on Monday morning another faceless child in the hall outside my office. This one was female, long hair held back with a ribbon. She was waiting outside a closed door, small and patient, and gray blankness beneath the hair. I froze in the act of locking my office door, but she either did not notice me or did not care. I did not approach her. I could not have approached her even if I had been ordered to, but I noted whose door she was waiting in front of and puzzled over it while I took the long way around to exit the museum. What had Claudius Winterson done to have these small patient specters pursuing him? My initial plan was to do nothing. It was no business of mine, and Dr. Winterson seemed, from what I could tell, to be taking no harm from his followers. His arguments with Mr. Felden were loud and vigorous, his footsteps in the corridor the same. And if I kept seeing small, black-clad, faceless figures in the hall, then perhaps that was just a sign that I needed to leave my office less frequently. I did notice, although I tried not to, that the number of children waiting in the hall increased from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3. 2 boys, either of whom could have been the child I saw at the reception, and the 1 girl. Once, as I was coming down the Parringtons' front steps, I saw them across the street, clearly oblivious to their presence. They seemed to be keeping their distance from him, never coming closer than 10 feet, even when they could. And I told myself that this was further proof I need do nothing, and that indeed there was nothing to be done. But then Dr. Winterson's behavior changed. His arguments got louder and shorter, and instead of staying in the Parrington until midnight, he started leaving before sunset. But it was still no business of mine, and it was not as if I would have had anything helpful to suggest. And I did my best to ignore Dr. Winterson, followers and all. That strategy worked well enough until the afternoon he appeared in my office doorway and said, "You're Mr. Booth, aren't you?" I had a momentary, useless urge to deny it. "Yes," I said. Is there something I can help you with, Dr. Winterson?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, not quite with a bang. He said, "I understand that you're the museum's expert on occult esoterica." Yes, that is, I suppose so." He was silent for a long moment, fidgeting like a boy called before the headmaster. Then he came up to my desk, leaned across it, and said in a harsh whisper, "You can see them, can't you?" I found I had leaned back in my chair. "Who?" I said. No, he said. "Don't play that game with me, Mr. Booth. You've seen them. You know they're outside in the hall, waiting." "You're deranged," I said, but it was a feeble effort. "I won't tell anyone if that's what you're worried about." It had not been, but now I was imagining what he might say to Dr. Starkweather if he chose. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said desperately. He leaned closer still and said, "The children." I crumbled under pressure. Yes, I have. Who are they?" "It doesn't matter," Dr. Winterson said impatiently. "How do I get rid of them?" I stared at him. "I don't know." "Oh, come now, Mr. Booth. You're an expert in these matters. You must have some idea." I shook my head. "I have never. What are they? Are they ghosts?" "You could call them that." "But is that what they are? That is to say, if they're really demons, calling them ghosts won't help." He stared at me blankly, as if he had never truly imagined having a discussion of the children beyond the fact of their presence. "I don't know," he said. "I never what? It doesn't matter. Yes, they're ghosts." "Then the question," I said apologetically, "is why do they haunt you?" "I don't know," said Dr. Winterson, but I knew he was lying. I said nothing. He said, "It was years ago. There was a fire in the hotel I was staying in. The children didn't make it out." "Are you their father?" "What? Good God, no. That's what I was telling you. I never even knew their names." "Then why should they haunt you?" "I don't know," he said again, but he was still lying. He knew perfectly well. He straightened. "The thing is, they're getting closer." "Closer?" "Since I first saw them. A week ago, they were 10 feet away. Now it's only 6. "Did you only start seeing them a week ago?" "What do you mean?" That is, they were following you at the Templeton reception. I saw one of them." "That long ago?" He seemed stunned. "When was the fire?" 10 years ago, he said impatiently, "maybe more." "Then what changed? Why did you suddenly start seeing them?" "You mean that you think they've been following me for 10 years? "I don't know, perhaps. But the important question now is, what changed?" "I tell you, I don't know." I thought he might still be lying, but he went on, "What do I do to get rid of them?" "I don't know," I said, and we stared at each other for a long beat of silence. "You must know of something," he said. "Are you Catholic? Were they?" "Presbyterian. I have no idea about them. Why?" "You might try lighting candles for them, but I've no idea if it will work." "Can't you just exorcise them?" "No. That is, that's what you do for demonic possession, not for ghosts." Finally, reluctantly, he said, "I got this in the mail after the reception." It was a newspaper clipping, brittle yellow with age. The headline was, "3 children die in hotel fire." Beneath it, in smaller type, "I could do nothing," said horror-stricken bystander. The expression on Dr. Winterson's face told me that he had been the bystander. Before I could read further, he had snatched it back and shoved it in his pocket. "Who sent it?" I asked. "I don't know." "Someone must think." "I know what they think," he shouted, "but it's not true. I couldn't have saved them even if I tried." "Oh," I said. He stared at me, his eyes getting wider and wilder as he realized what he had admitted. "It was a terrible fire," he said, now almost pleading. "There was no way." "Then why do they haunt you?" Why does someone send you newspaper clippings? He shook his head angrily. I just want to get rid of them before they what? Before they get too close, he said, whispering again as if he was afraid the ghost would hear him. Please, you must know something. I wanted him out of my office. I said, there might be something in the stacks, but it's much too late to go looking tonight. The sun's almost down. That made him jump as I'd expected it would. Tomorrow, he said. You'll look tomorrow? Yes, I said, although I may not find anything. He waved that off. There must be something. We can look tomorrow. I wanted him out of my office more than I wanted to argue with him. I said nothing. He said, good night then, Mr. Booth, and finally left. I dragged my belongings together, shrugging into my coat as I got out my keys, and was in the hall in time to hear the snick of his office door closing behind him. I locked my door, clumsy with haste, and was starting down the hall when I realized something was wrong. The hallway was empty. But if the hallway was empty, where were the children? That was when Dr. Winterson screamed, his voice shreddingly sharp, wordlessly full of terror. I hesitated. The door across from mine banged open, and Mr. Kimball said, what in hell was that? Trapped, I turned to him and said, I think it was Dr. Winterson. Dr. Winterson, said Mr. Kimball, as if doubting that Dr. Winterson could ever make such a noise. He hurried to Dr. Winterson's door and knocked on it. Dr. Winterson, are you all right? There was no answer. Without wanting to, I came closer. Dr. Winterson, said Mr. Kimball again. He tried the door. Dr. Winterson? Mr. Kimball tried to open the door, but there was something blocking it. Come here, Mr. Booth, and lend me a shoulder. I'm afraid something may have happened to him. There was no may about it, but I did not say so. I joined him, longing every second to be running the other way, and together we managed to shove the door open enough that we could see what was blocking it. It was Dr. Winterson. Oh, God, said Mr. Kimball, I'd better call for an ambulance. You stay here. He pounded off down the hall toward the exterior phone. Whether Dr. Winterson was alive or dead, and he was almost certainly dead, there was nothing I could do to help him. But I stayed, staring at his shoulder, which was all I could see of him, and wondering about that newspaper article he would not let me read. A terrible fire, 3 children dead, and a bystander who said he could not help them. I wondered what it was Dr. Winterson could have done and did not do. I wondered who sent the clipping and if they had anything to do with Dr. Winterson's patient silent followers. Had they been following him for 10 years? Or had they found him at the Templeton reception? Something made me look up. The children were perhaps 10 feet away, standing in front of the alcove that held the bust of an early donor. They were standing quite still, heads turned toward me. The 2 boys were holding hands. As I looked at them, the girl waved solemnly and the 3 children vanished. The haunting of Dr. Claudius Winterson was finished. Even if I'd agreed to look tonight, I said to Dr. Winterson's corpse, I wouldn't have found anything because there's nothing to find. Nothing but anecdotes and superstition. I couldn't have helped you. But she had waved, as if to a friend or a co-conspirator. And Dr. Claudius Winterson was dead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was deliciously creepy and a wonderful way to start. I also enjoyed the cat sighting. I had a cat of my own through most of that. And also these hauntings bring to mind Halloween is very soon.
It is very soon, frighteningly so.
And I would like to go trick-or-treating with all of our ephemera friends, everyone who's out there on YouTube.
But we need to find a house. No, not a house, a castle. A spooky castle far away in the mountains, the howling of wolves rising on the wind.
And we go up to the door?
Yes, now this is important. When Katie knocks wherever you are, you've got to yell trick or treat. Are you ready?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna knock. 1, 2, trick or treat.
Trick or treat. A pale figure with sharp fangs answers, saying,
more than a trick, trivia! In Sheridan Le Fanu's vampire story Carmilla, what is the vampire's actual name?
answer on Twitter or in the chat. We'll see if we can make it to the next house.
All right, the real name of the vampire in Carmilla. And while you ponder that, I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's performer. Miroki is a recovering international performer and producer. After 10 years in the industry, she pivoted into her current role as a business consultant to help build small businesses and enterprises. She holds an MPA with specializations in strategic management, organizational behavior, and entrepreneurship. By moonlight, or by folding the time-space continuum to create more hours, Miroki continues her creative endeavors. She is currently working to complete her debut opera metal EP. Almost 2 years since the first lockdown, she is overjoyed to be training on aerial lyra hoops and silks again. Her recent project, at 9 Ounces Please on Instagram, shares her decade-long passion for wine and is working to change the face of the wine industry while helping people make savvy decisions for what to pour in their glass. Welcome, Miroki.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. I was like listening to that, and I was like, who is that? I could feel my heart rate going up, and suddenly I'm filled with like inexplicable nervousness to live up to the expectations that are now set upon me. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Ephemera. I am so honored and pleased to be on stage. I think the last time I did any performance was one virtual performance last May, and then promptly my creative juices died, and I don't even think I sang for months. So it really means so much to me to have the opportunity to come back on stage. I don't know if there's very much to say other than maybe talk a little bit about the inspiration for my song. As Katie so eloquently said, I create opera metal. I was working on my EP before the lockdown, and all of that went on hold, but I'm very excited to say that literally this Monday, I went back into studio for the first time with my producer in over a year. So I'm very excited to get the ball rolling on that. I suppose there is a touch of content warning for this song. It only just occurred to me now. There's talks of toxic relationships and maybe kind of like intermarriages and that kind of stuff. Full disclosure, this song was actually inspired by Del Toro's Crimson Peak. And it speaks, a lot to, toxic relationships, maybe even, and a lot on the pressures that the patriarchy has put on women. And it kind of looks at the history of that, and maybe the idea of intermarriages of the different classes, like the upper class always marrying within the family for many years to try and keep things pure and within the family, and what does that all mean? So I think maybe without further ado, we'll just let you go in the song. It's composed by me. I want to thank my team, Mitchell, Sammy Duke, and Leah, who were part of the inaugural production of the song and whose instrumentals you will hear tonight. And I composed the piano bass for this, and of course the song and the vocals. So thank you, enjoy. Hope you enjoy it.
Oh
Thank you, Miroki. No, I was muted, so no one heard my scream of joy. Jen, how are we doing with our trivia question for trivia or treat?
Sorry, headphones went down. That was perfectly mood setting. And we had an answer in chat to the quiz. It is right. The vampire's name was Mircalla, an anagram of Carmilla. Very clever. Now we get to move to the next
I
house
love it.
on our tour of terror. It's a crumbling manor, bleeding, rot, and scabbed with ivy. A ruined tower stands scarred by lightning.
Okay, I guess we're going up to the front door. I'm gonna knock again. Trick or treat!
Trick or treat! A mysterious, cadaverous woman in a trailing gown answers. Trivia trick, she says. Under what name did Mary Shelley first publish Frankenstein in 1818?
Ooh, the name under which Frankenstein was originally published. What a curious trivia. Answer on Twitter or in the YouTube chat. And if we get it right, there's one more spooky house to go.
In the meantime, please welcome our second reader. Anuja Varghese is a queer woman of color, pushcart-nominated writer whose work appears in Hobart, the Malahat Review, Plenitude Magazine, Humber Literary Review, and others. She recently completed a collection of short stories and is at work on a debut novel while pursuing a creative writing certificate from the University of Toronto. Anuja is also a professional grant writer and editor, and in 2021 took on the role of fiction editor with The Puritan. Find Anuja on Twitter at Anuja_V, same on Instagram or through her website, and I will put the website in the comments. Anuja, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Miroki, that was incredible. That was so good. My heart's like beating from that. That was fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna read tonight a little bit from a short story called The Vitalis Song. A Vitala, for some context, is a creature, a kind of cursed creature from South Asian folklore. So exists kind of between the living and the dead, roams the charnel grounds, feasting on corpses, and inhabits corpses to roam our earthly plane. So there's your context, the Vitalis Song. The river is vast and full of ashes. The rickshaw-wala warns the foreigner not to drink the water. The woman adjusts her sunglasses, and even though the sun has not yet risen and the sky is still draped in purple, layered with the delicate lace of a pre-dawn fog, she peppers the driver with questions, first in English with poor results, then in halting Hindi about the river, the temples that line it, and the pyres that billow smoke across its surface. He is short on answers and only points her in the direction of the Ghats. She pays him the agreed-upon sum and climbs down from the bicycle-drawn cart. He will take her no further than this. I watch, veiled, cursing this half-blind corpse whose body I have borrowed. I see then what I have come here for. Under one arm, the foreigner cradles a silver urn. My kind consumes flesh, not ash, but for the woman in the urn, I'll make an exception. The foreigner begins to make her way down the steps, and I follow. No one looks twice at an old beggar woman with an acid-scarred face. At least here, by the water's edge, the smell of rot that seeps through the cotton sari in which this body was killed is masked by all the other smells mingling around me. Dead fish and fire, sewage and smoke. The woman has come dressed in a black salwar kameez. Black is the color of mourning in the country she calls home. In this country, we wear white to part with our dead, and soon the Ghats will be crowded with men in white kurtas, women weeping, children scolded into solemnity, all there to feed the river the remains of those they loved. But what of those who die unloved? What of those whose families cast them out, who will pay no priest to chant over their pyres and see their souls safely off? They are left to the charnel grounds. Not many cities allow such places anymore, abandoned groves of withered fruit trees where dead bodies are left to decompose, unburied, unburnt. It is unsanitary, they say now, a risk to public health. But in this city, where I was once young and knew what it was to love defiantly, 2 charnel grounds still exist, one to the east, marked by a Bodhi tree, and one to the west, marked by a Naga tree. Today, you would have to be willing to make some unsavory inquiries to find these unholy sites. Or, like me, you would have to live there. But I wouldn't wish such an eternity on anyone, no matter what their crime. Mine was merely to love the woman in the urn. In the summer of 1981, Sharmila and I became obsessed with the actress Hema Malini. We bought balcony-level tickets to see her new film and were so enthralled by her, that we immediately bought tickets to see it again. We didn't whoop and holler like the men on the ground level did when she appeared on screen, sultry in a black sequined gown and feather boa. We didn't have to. It was enough for us to be together in the dark, our damp fingers intertwined, drinking in her staggering beauty. My family lived in a flat around the corner from the theater, 6 of us crammed into 2 rooms with peeling plaster and spotty electricity. That's how there was money to send me to college. There wouldn't be much left over for a decent dowry, but an educated girl was a good investment for any family these days, or so my parents reasoned. Sharmila's people were in Delhi, so she stayed in the dorm. We took turns standing in front of the fan bolted to the built-in desk, one of us holding a hairbrush for a microphone and playing the part of Hema Malini, the other mouthing the words to her song, playing a smitten Amitabh Bachchan in the audience. Mere naseeb mein tu hai kya nahi? Sharmila twirling, hair flying around her, singing Hema's lyrics to me like she expected an answer to the question, are you there in my destiny or not? I picked up the refrain, dancing with her on our imaginary stage. Tere naseeb mein main hu kya nahi? Am I there in your destiny or not? I put my hands on her waist and she put her head on my shoulder. It was easy to fall in love with one another like that. During the monsoons, my mother worried I would ruin my uniform running home in the rain, so I started sharing Sharmila's narrow bed. Even with the fan whirring all night, the heat in her tiny room left our night clothes soaked through, and eventually we stopped wearing them altogether. We sang each other to sleep, except when we didn't. At first, we said things like, I'm sorry, should I stop? And is this all right? Until we didn't have to say anything at all. I traced my name down her spine and tasted her on my fingertips, and every day prayed fervently for storms. The figs were the beginning of the end of everything, but I couldn't have known that then. Love had made of me something invincible, and I was not interested in considering its consequences. We walked through Tateri Bazaar hand in hand, and if anyone noticed, they might have thought we were sisters. Sharmila bought a half-dozen figs, so ripe the sap oozed out into the bottom of their paper bag. My family says I must come home, she told me, splitting a fig down the middle with a painted fingernail. You can't go, I said. What will I do without you? It's only for a few months. I'll come back. She bit into the fig's pink flesh and smiled, swaying her hips to music only we could hear. Mere naseeb mein tu hai kya nahi? Whether it was desperation or desire or both that possessed me in that moment, I cannot say, but in the middle of that crowded bazaar, I turned around and kissed her. I sucked the fruit right off her tongue, and it was the sweetest mouthful I had ever known. The fear and the shame that filled Sharmila's face when I let her go were slow to register. I was still basking in the sheer delight that had come first. Gossip spreads faster than fire, and soon everyone knew about us. Sharmila was 500 miles away in Delhi, so I cannot know what penance she was made to pay. I only know what happened to me. The neighbors said I was unclean, my disease a risk to public morality. The landlord threatened to put us out on the street if I stayed. The police came banging on our door. I was charged with an act of indecency. Those who meant to console called me confused, and those who meant to punish called me criminal. And when my father wouldn't pay the fine, they put me in a jail cell for 3 months. My mother said, please keep her there. We cannot take her back. but they threw me out anyway when my sentence was up. Sharmila never came back to the city, never returned my calls or letters. Sometime later, I heard she got married and moved to Canada with her husband. She always had been the better performer between us. What could I do? I roamed the gats and alleys, begging, praying, always finding solace in the rain. The men who finally murdered me to make me an example threw my body in the Western charnel grounds, and the snakes that held sway there asked if I should like to stay or go. I'll come back, Sharmila said, before she smiled, before the fig juice made her lips sweet. She'll come back, I told the snakes. I have to wait for her. Oh yes, they hissed. We know all about the waiting. There are so many of you here waiting to be claimed. Stay then and join the guardians of these grounds, but know that you will be confined to the shadows. The daylight will reveal your true nature and you will be hunted. This is nothing so new, I said. I was hunted in the daylight for my true nature in life. Why not in death too? Unless, the snake said, coiling around my mutilated corpse, unless your love finds you and plucks you out of this place. They chortled with fangs bare. Then by all means, go to the eastern charnel grounds and be free to taste the sun. I made the deal and woke transformed. I have wandered the city by night since then, slipping into new bodies at will, snapping the necks of men who realize too late they are not the only predators stalking the riverbank for soft and easy prey. I make madness and mischief and feed on the dead. I mine the dreams of children for moments of joy, and they wake howling at the horror of the monster in their heads. I sleep at daybreak in a grave of my own making with hundreds of others who live here too, trapped between hope and waiting, making our desolate home under the naga tree. I knew Sharmila had come back because I heard our song, an old song now, seeking me out, calling me to follow a rickshaw to the river. The rider was a foreigner with a familiar face and a silver urn tucked under her arm. I felt sorrow to see Sharmila return to me as ash, but I was not surprised. She must have known before I did that in order to be together, we would both need to become something new. And I'll stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was fun. I love stories where it's like the prose is doing 5 things at once. It's tone, it's atmosphere, it's plot, it's setting, it's character. And that was just a master class in that.
Oh, thank you.
And as always, I'm glad I'm muted when there's twists, as I squeal. All right. What does the chat say?
Sure. The chat, there's a few things, but when Stevie Reads got it, and they said, anonymous. Mary Shelley originally published Frankenstein anonymously.
It was a trick question.
A trick question. Now our final house. Why? It's a house that looks just like yours.
Mine. All right. Last time, friends. Ready? Trick or treat?
Trick or treat. Someone answers the door. They look just like the person you know best of all, down to the very smallest detail.
Trick, they say. You must provide a Halloween trivia question for me to answer, which I think means you have to give us a question. I realize that is unclear.
You, a reversal. Audience, put your Halloween trivia in the chat or on Twitter. We will pick one question and we will try to answer it.
So see if you can stump us. That'll be fun. And while you're busy getting ready for that, it is my very great pleasure to introduce our final reader tonight. Catherynne M. Valenti is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of over 40 books of speculative poetry, fantasy, and science fiction. She lives on a small island off the coast of Maine with her partner, one very enormous cat, a toddler son whose size is finally catching up to the cat, a red accordion, an uncompleted master's degree, a room full of yarn, a spinning wheel with ulterior motives, a cupboard of jam and pickles, a bookshelf full of folktales, an industrial torch, an Oxford English dictionary, and a garden that might or might not be full of fairies. Welcome, Kat.
Let's try unmuting myself. It's a novel thing. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read from L'Esprit de l'Escalier, the Orpheus and Eurydice story that came out a couple of months ago on Tor.com. It is quite long, so I'm just going to start at the beginning and get as far as I can in the allotted time, and you can go and read the rest of it on the website. So this is an Orpheus and Eurydice story, which will become clear. It is not like other Orpheus and Eurydice stories, much as Eurydice is not like other girls. Here we go. First step. Orpheus puts down a plate of eggs in front of her. The eggs are perfect. After everything, he finally got it just right. Oozing lightly salted yolks the color of marigolds, white spreading into golden brown lace. The plate is perfect. His mother's pattern, a geometric Mediterranean blue key design on bone white porcelain. The coffee is perfect. The juice is perfect. The toast is perfect. The album he put on the record player to provide a pleasant breakfast soundtrack is perfect. Cafe au lait with a shower of nutmeg, tangerine with a dash of bitters, nearly burnt, but not quite. Strange ways, here we come. Eurydice always loved the Smiths. Melancholy things made her smile. Balloons and cartoons and songs in any of the major keys put her out of sorts. When they first met, she slept exclusively in a disintegrating black shirt from the 1984 European tour. He thought that was so fucking cool. Back when he had the capacity to think that anything was cool. She's wearing it now, nothing else. Dark fluid pools and patches on the undersides of her thighs, draining slowly down to her heels. Her long black hair hangs limp over Morrissey's perpetually pained face. The top of her smooth gray breast shows through a tear so artfully placed you'd think they ripped it to specks in the factory. Sunlight from the kitchen windows creeps in and sits guiltily at her feet like a neglected cat. Orpheus never once managed a breakfast this good when she was alive. If he's honest with himself, it wouldn't have even occurred to him to try. Darling, he says every morning, you have to eat. But she doesn't. Not really. They both know that. She lifts one heavy purplish hand and drops it, settling on the only thing she does need, a peeling, dishwasher-tormented limited edition 1981 Princess Leia glass filled with microwaved lamb's blood. 45 seconds on high. Orpheus winces. She retracts her hand. She is very sorry. She'll drink it later, congealed and lukewarm, alone. Eurydice picks up a slender and very clean fork. The problem has never been that she doesn't want to get better. Her short fingernails have black dirt under them, no matter how she scrubs and scrubs in the sink, no matter what kind of soap she buys. Orpheus hears the water running at 3 a.m. every night, the trickling, suckling song through the pipes, the negative space next to him in bed, still cold from her body. But it doesn't matter. On Sundays, he paints her nails for her so she doesn't have to see it. But today is Saturday. The polish is chipped and flaked. The constant crescent moons of old earth show through. She slices through an egg and lets the yolk run like yellow blood, severs a corner of toast and dredges it in the warm, sunny liquid so full of life, full enough to nourish a couple of cells all the way through to a downy little baby birdie with sweet black eyes. If only things had gone another way. Eurydice hesitates before putting it to her lips, knowing what will happen, knowing it will hurt them both, but mainly her, like everything else. She shoves it in quickly, attempts a smile. And just this once, the smile does come when it's called. There she is, as she always was, framed by tall paneled windows and vintage posters from his oldest shows. Open mic Friday at the Clotho Cafe, $5 cover. Singing Rock Music Festival, July 21st, Akron, New York. Live at the Apollo. And for a moment, there she is. All cheekbones and eyelashes and history, grinning so wide for him that her pale, sharp teeth glisten in the rippling cherry blossom shadows. Then her jaw pops out of its socket with a loud duk and sags, hanging at an appalling, useless angle. She presses up against her chin, fighting to keep it in, but the fight isn't fair, and it never could be. Eurydice locks eyes with Orpheus. No tears, though she really is so sorry for what was always about to happen. But her ducks were cauterized by the sad, soft event horizon between, well, there and here. Orpheus longs for her tears, real and hot and sweet and salted as caramel, and he hates himself for that longing. But he hates her for it too. A river of black, wet earth and pebbles and moss and tiny, blind, helpless worms erupts out of Eurydice's smile, splattering so hard onto his mother's perfect plate that it cracks down the middle, and dirt pools out across the table, and the worms nose mutely at the crust of almost burnt toast. He clenches his teeth as he clears the dishes. Eurydice stares up at him, her eyes swimming with apologies. It's fine, he says, curt and flat. It's fine. Somewhere between the table and the counter, the tangerine juice stops being tangerine juice. It thickens, swirls into silvery gold ambrosia, releases the scent of honeycomb, new bread, old books. Orpheus dumps it in the sink. Second step. Marriage isn't what he thought it would be. She didn't even thank him for making her breakfast. He doesn't want that to annoy him the way it does, but he can't shake it. She owes him. She owes him so much. Orpheus remembers the days when he was so full of her, nothing else would fit. And then when she was gone, he dreamed of her so vividly he woke with her scent pouring from his skin. When nothing was innocent. Every chair was just an inch to the left or right of where he'd left it the night before. Every book opened to a different page than the one he'd marked. Every lost key or wallet or watch not misplaced but taken. Every flicker of every light bulb was her, couldn't be anything but her, his wife, calling out to him, begging him to hear her, pleading through the impassable doorway of her own final breath. He was so young then, so stupid in love, unaware that there were certain things he simply could not have. Limitation was for other people. All he'd ever needed to do was sing, and the world opened itself up to him like a jewelry box. She was there when it did, the little pale dancer on the velvet of his ease, spinning inexorably round and round on one agonizingly perfect frozen foot. If the world declined to open for others, that did not concern him. When she's back, he dreamt then. When I have her back, I will be happy again. She will be whole and laughing and warm as August rain, and she will look at me every day, just the way she did when we first met, as though nothing bad ever happened. Her eyes will be the same shade of green. The span of her wrist will fit between my thumb and forefinger. We'll go to the movies every night. I won't even want other girls. We'll drink ourselves into a spiral of infinite brunches. She'll put her hand on the small of my back when we're photographed just the way she used to. Her smile will be full of new songs. When I touch her again, time will run backward and gravity will flee and pain will be a story we tell at parties. A fond joke whose punchline we never get quite right. Everything will go back to the way it was. And she won't remember anything, like in the soaps. She'll be so grateful and relieved, and she won't remember any of it, not dying and not the rest. I will bear the weight of our past for both of us. I'm strong enough for that. When Orpheus wakes in the night, she's never beside him. She stands at the window, looking out into the chestnuts and the crab apples. The moon blows right through her. He can see mold flowering along her spine. Where she touches the curtains, it spreads, unfurling, as luxurious as ivy.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Just unabashedly a fan of the prose and the style, and going to be haunted by that one for a while.
Please go read the rest of it. It goes in wild places. So,
and we have linked to it on YouTube chat and on Twitter. So you can go catch the rest of it. And be sure to catch Kat's newest book, Comfort Me with Apples, out on November 9th. All right. I think we need to answer our final Halloween trivia trick.
We're going to take the first one, which was twice called out in chat. What was the original vegetable traditionally carved at Halloween?
Oh, I know this one. It was turnips.
We trick-or-treated successfully.
They look really scary because they get like all shrivelly and it's creepy.
I have not tried that. I think that would be fun. That was a lot of tricks. What about the treats? Not turnips.
I think the real treat was the friends we made along the way.
Oh, that's very true.
Also, the fantastic readings and performance.
They were absolutely, absolutely gorgeous tonight, and you are
It's so
absolutely
beautiful.
right. Also, the power of imagination.
Because when you keep Halloween in your heart all the year round, you'll find sweetness and treats galore. And yes, specters too.
Woohoo! So until next time, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Ephemera Series, and please subscribe to this YouTube page. We'd like to thank the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America for their funding assistance.
And as we close out tonight, we'd also like to thank our fabulous readers and performer, composer Alex White, our friends, families, loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us. We will see you next month for our second birthday bash. What? This reading series is 2 years old. Wow. And that will be on November 17th, right here on YouTube.